A lot of people are going to be turning to entrepreneurs, self-employing themselves to get through this crazy time we are in the workplace.
Thank you for joining the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines. Our guest is music producer Steven Leavitt, a 25-year veteran of the industry. As the son of two stunt performers and early experiences in film himself, Steven offers great advice for creatives trying to break out or monetize their art. He also explains how he survived 25 years in LA. Here's Steven.
The artists that are successful financially, the painters, the photographers, and the musicians, the ones that make a lot of money and they're very successful, they are on time. So
I'm going to sample that and put it on my podcast as like a PSA, a public service announcement. Yeah. Business is hard, and being unemployed and underemployed is hard. I have like 3 friends right now who have been searching for jobs for a year, and they're not freelancers. They haven't been in business for themselves, and they're finding out real quickly, like, that may be the option for me. And also, I notice it attracts a certain kind of people. So, people who love stability don't do so well in creative fields. One of my first jobs, I worked at Kinko's just out of college, and I was like working in the computer center. And I was there for 3 months, and I found out that the manager that was there had been there for 10 years, and he was making $5 an hour more than me. And I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, and I was like, I got to get out of here. I cannot, I cannot be in Kinko's in 10 years. This is just a dead end. So I mean, it's just, we're a different breed. Entrepreneurs, creatives, we do our own thing, and I think that's the dream, right? The dream is to have the freedom, like you said, the free time, like to have the freedom of your time. And I think, although I haven't achieved yet the financial business success that I'm working towards at this point, I really do feel like I've sort of hit this balance of like, where actually my time is my own. There have never been more tools available for your business journey than there are right now. Like when I had a live music showcase in 2005, we could not run a credit card. We did not have Square on our phones. We had the and they cost like, $3,000 to set up. And so we just took cash, and we missed out on a ton of business because of that. We didn't have Google Docs. We did not have Calendly. We did not have Facebook groups. There were so many things that just didn't exist, that if we were fast forward 5 years, I mean, this little other business that I had would have been so much easier to do.
I wanted to ask you, a lot of people that I meet that are in film and audio production usually have somebody in the house or somebody, maybe a grandfather or parent, that has some similar musical skill.
Yes, in a sense, my mom and dad are both musical in different ways. So funny side story. My parents are professional stunt people. And so I grew up in going to France and Malta and Ireland, playing with Pierce Brosnan's kids, because my mom doubled Stephanie Zimbalist on Remington Steele. What I think my dad gave me was a sense of musicology. My mom, she wrote songs and sang a little bit, but she never pursued it. But I think I really got my ear and my love of music from her. There was something about the soup of the environment that I grew up in, that it was sort of like it wasn't like the alternate path, but it was just what I took to like a duck to water. I woke up when I was 8 years old hearing like beautiful piano music in my head. And I woke up first thing in the morning, everyone's still asleep, and I went to the piano and I tried to play it. And I got so frustrated because I couldn't actually make the piano do what I was hearing in my dream. And that was the day that I went to my mom and said, all right, she'd been saying, do you want piano lessons? You seem good at this. I'm like, no, I don't want piano lessons. That morning I said, Mom, I want piano lessons. One of my friends and I stayed at it, and we became a band. So when I was 12, 13, 14, we actually went to the studio. Someone at my church was a producer who produced for Tag Team, which did Whoomp, There It Is. So he had a studio in South Central. We went down there and we recorded a demo of all these tracks that I had sequenced, and my friend had written the lyrics, and I sang backups on it. And so this was my early early on, I knew this was exactly what I wanted to do. When I was a child, I remember one Christmas morning, there was a motorcycle by the Christmas tree. It was a little Pee Wee Yamaha 50, and it was like right there by the tree. And I must have been like, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I walk right past the motorcycle going, where's the big Christmas present? And at that point, my parents went, maybe he's not going to be like us. So,
But you did do a little bit of that, right? I mean, I think you did have some experience as a stuntman. Is that correct?
it's funny. I actually did. And I was working for my dad's friend who was coordinating a TV show. And my job was to sit on a park bench, and Bucky Lasek, the famous skateboarder, was supposed to jump over my head with a skateboard. And it was at that moment that I realized the only reason I had this job was because of who my parents were. And I knew friends who I had helped get into the business who were like talented black belt martial artists, who were like expert BMX riders, who were like multi-athlete horseback riders, on and on and on. And they like really, really, really wanted to break into the stunt business. And here I was, a kid who didn't want to do stunts, who didn't train. I didn't even lift weights. And, here I am getting these jobs because of who my parents are. And I thought, you know what? I could get really hurt because, that after the stunt was done, he's like, if that skateboard would have hit in the head, that would have been really, really hard day. I was like, you're right. and then, I also thought to myself, well, if there are people that I know who work really hard and they deserve this job, and it's not my passion, and I could get really hurt. Yeah, I could probably, I could probably have like 4 houses by now if I had stayed in the stunt business. Big money, especially like back then. But I just, didn't feel right about it. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue my own dreams, which is something, to my mom and dad's credit, they always encouraged me to do. Steve, you do what you want to do. When I left school, I realized that what I really wanted to do was, multimedia and music. And so my dad encouraged me to pursue that. And that was kind of where it all started. This was back in 2000. Yeah, right before 9/11, actually.
So you did live and then said, you know what? How long did you do live sound before you decided to?
So I never did like concert live sound, but I did a lot of independent, like I did some film festivals, I did some church gigs, I did a lot of weddings, I did a lot of like one-off events where I would bring my system, tune the gear. I'd go like a week ahead of time, scout the venue, see where the power was, and all that kind of stuff. And I actually really liked it. The thing about live sound, it actually resembled more about what my dad did. Was my dad was in the 80s, he invented the stunt rigging business. And he used to work for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he used to work like on all like Last Action Hero, True Lies. He'd do all the flying systems and help people do, like if there was an explosion, there'd be a cable that he rigged for them to fly out, out of frame. And so when I would go to work with him on like a music video, it was very similar. The changeovers, I found those were pretty cool gigs because a lot of the people were independent. And they were very appreciative to be playing. It's a lot different bars. I never really had to do a bar gig, and I played as the band during bar gigs, and I do not envy that position. It's one of the most thankless jobs, and it's some of the lowest pay. And everyone's drunk, which just throws gasoline on a fire. And bands think they sound better when they're drunk. They don't. It's just, hopefully the rest of the audience is drinking too, so they don't notice. I mean, that's pretty much. And then the volume levels. I mean, it'll ruin your hearing, especially working in when I played the whiskey. I mean, even when I've gone to see people the whiskey, it's like the volume levels are like 110 decibels. It's just murder on your ears. And I had permanent tinnitus for about 12 years. Because of playing in a rock band. I played B3 in like a classic modern rock band. And one time we were playing for a showcase, or we were practicing for a showcase, and the guitarist was like, we have to be awesome. So we did 5 days a week, and we rehearsed 3 hours a day. First of all, terrible idea. And there was this one promoter who was coming by to see us. And my guitarist moves his amp to my side of the room where my amp is. And I'm like, dude, you got to move your amp. He's like, no, I'm not going to move my amp. So I got a guitar amp in my right ear. I got a B3 in my right ear. And then the promoter shows up, and we're playing our set. He's like, oh, this is going to be great, whatever. And as soon as we're done, I hear my ear go on the right side, and I get vertigo. And I was like, oh no, this is bad. And so I go outside, and all I can hear is this just really loud hissing sound. And I messed up my ear so bad. Thankfully, I didn't ruin it permanently, but I think I had tinnitus for about 10 to 12 years. And it finally went away. And I'm so...
It drives people crazy. I think William Shatner, he even mentioned very openly several times that he contemplated suicide because his tinnitus was so bad.
Yeah.
I want to back up for our numbers.
Well, and I want to riff on that for a second, because one of the podcasts that I interviewed was actually and the Language of Creativity podcast, which is the podcast I started because me and the artist I was working with didn't want to edit guitars. So I said, hey, do you want to record a podcast? It was like the best procrastination ever. I've been thinking about a podcast, and we basically came up with a podcast in the first 1 minute of the show. He names the show. The Language of Creativity. It just kind of came out of the ether. Anyway, so one of the interviews I did, because my goal is to interview artists of all art forms, not just musicians, not just actors, painters, and to learn things from different ones. So one of the people that I interviewed was my physical therapist. And we were talking about pain management, which is a very similar thing to tinnitus. It's pain that you don't think of as pain. It's a constant signal from your nervous system that just doesn't go away. And that was one of the things that she said, I haven't met a pain management patient yet who hasn't not wanted to be on this planet anymore. And I have so much empathy because I, have dealt with my own journey with pain management without drugs. And thankfully, physical therapy is really helpful. But, kind of had to go on my own healer's journey with that. And, there have been times where just the dull ache that just won't go away. Like I'd pull the car over and be screaming, like, God help me. Like, this is unbearable. And, you go to the doctor and they're just like, well, you look fine. No, I don't see anything wrong. And it's just like the most invalidating thing in the world. Says, oh, it's just tinnitus, no big deal.
I didn't do it for not going to drugs especially being in LA and not turning to drugs for the tinnitus. I did, I usually read nonfiction business books, but what I'll do is I'll mix in some autobiographies, to take a break. And I did 4 LA musicians, not intentionally. I had no idea. I was just wanted to do musicians, and come to find out they all were based around LA. So I got this, and this was fairly recently. So I got this kind of picture of the LA scene. And of course it was drugs, and these people with these crazy schedules. So a lot of times there were people that just like Michael McDonald. He just likes drugs. He doesn't do it. He's clean and sober now. But a lot of the other musicians in their books, it was more about so that they could function, so that they could do these marathon recording sessions. They were using it as a form of medication.
I wondered how Whitney Houston sang Emotional. And then I met an artist I was working with who had done cocaine. Like I was such a goody two shoes growing up that didn't even enter my radar. I didn't realize that people were going into the honey wagons to do drugs. Like that was like 80s was with a heyday. They called it the martini shot because they actually could drink martinis on the last shot of the day. Like the whole movie crew is like, oh yeah, it's martini shot. I was like totally, but so I was talking to a client who did some cocaine in the 80s, and he was describing to me what it was like, and I'm like, so that's how Whitney Houston did. When you listen to Emotional, you listen to all those tunes of the 80s, they're just so pumped and so high energy, and I'm going, they were all on cocaine. Apparently, I'm ADHD. I don't have an official diagnosis, but my wife looks over at me one day and she goes, wait a minute. Are you adult ADHD? I was like, what do you mean? And she reads them off. I'm like, yeah. Oh, I probably am. And I think this is just also an artistic thing, but the tunnel focus. Like I heard this about Michael Jackson. He had ass power. And I was like, what do you mean ass power? A friend of mine said this to me. He's like, he could work for like 16 hours straight and not get out of the chair. And I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. Like that's like what I used to do. And so one of the things that happened in my pain management journey, realizing, so my day job after after I dropped out of college, my mom's like, well, Steve's going to need a job. So she called up her friend who worked, he directed all the background traffic in the movie Chips, or the TV show Chips, about this California Highway Patrol. And he was friends with Eric Estrada, cool guy, really, really fun to work for. Anyway, so it was like, what we did was, we drive our own cars onto the set, and we'd drive in circles, or we drive back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they'd be like helicopters over here and stunts are over here. And, they'd be like, okay, set a weed pattern and the cars are going to go between you. So for 12 years, that was my job as a precision driver. It's like in the Truman Show, how like all the cars start driving around. It's the same 5 cars going around in a circle trying to make like, a road. That's literally what I did. And so it was a great compliment to music and freelance video editing and stuff like that, because of how flexible it was. It was like I had all this time in between shoots, and then it was good money when we do, and we love it when we go out into overtime. So, I'd be sitting in my car for 16 hours because it'd be a 12-hour day. You'd be in double time. It'd be 2.5 hours to work. You sit at lunch, you sit at, and then you sit home in traffic on the way. And then, I'd go sit in the studio for 12, 14 hours, just writing or just producing or just editing. And it took a number on my body. And so I think it was like about 26 when all of a sudden I had the shooting pain like down my seat. And I was like, whoa, something's wrong. Like, this isn't normal. And so anyway, that, I had all kinds of jaw issues and back issues and, tension with, headaches and migraines and all kinds of stuff. And so years later, I had to do a lot of like soul searching to reteach myself how to work, and I had my physical therapist come over and help me make my studio desk, there is ergonomically, like the height, the monitor arm that comes closer, best $200 I ever spent, by the way, articulating monitor arm. Get one if you're in studio work. But just, like how I hold my hands, the fact that I never get up and stretch, I wouldn't drink water, I'd forget to eat. And so that, all that has caught up to that with the sitting in cars all day, like for years, it had caught up with my body to the point where like, I didn't know how to regulate my pain. I didn't know how to regulate my stress levels. I didn't have any normal circadian rhythms because of how, I'd work all night and then I'd have, early morning things, and it was just kind of all over the place. And eventually your body starts to not want to do that anymore. And, after a lot of soul searching, what I realized was I'm not very nice to myself. The wife says, you're a horrible boss. I'm like, I am a horrible boss. Like, who else makes yourself sit there for 14 hours and doesn't let you take lunch, doesn't let you take a break or have a snack or drink water, things like that? So that's when I started to realize, okay, so if I'm forcing myself to do something that my body hates, even though I think I love it, my body doesn't love it. And so that's when I started to go on this quest of like, reprogramming my own habits and patterns and trying to find little workarounds and hacks so that I wouldn't sit down so much at work, and, to, remember to set a timer to get up and take breaks and eat and all those kind of things. And I'm still not perfect at it, but I found that my love for music over the last 5 years has slowly like returned, and that my creativity has started to go off the charts because I'm actually in tune, with my body. I'm a very, I can be a very, thought-focused person, but I am a very emotional being, and all my creativity channels through my connection, my empathy. And so to like not be connected to my body when I'm making music, when I'm creating, when I'm writing, when I'm interacting with people, it would mean that like I wasn't like living to my fullest self. I wasn't creating with my full being. And so that journey of like, kind of that Chiron healer's journey for me actually ironically brought me to a deeper place of creativity within my work, my business, my music. And it's just like unlocked so much for me. And I don't have quite the amount of pain that I had, before. So,
Steven, did you run into did you have a mentor? Was there a book? Did you do yoga, meditation? How, because I'm sure there was some methodology there.
this lady that I met named Tony Koch, sort of like we would go out to lunch, and she'd sit with me and we'd talk, and she'd say, Steve, you really need to align the schedule with what you want to do. Like, you're always pushing and pushing and pushing, but you're creative, you're sensitive, you're intuitive, you need to feed your soul. You can't just, like, be all rock and roll. You're not a drug person. Like, you're not this like hard kind of person. You're like a really sensitive soul. And so you have to, it's like, yeah, you can record rock and roll music, but you need to really like reflect. And so she gave me so much to work with, and also taught me a meditation technique that really changed my life. I don't know if you know in yoga the idea of the chakras. So I learned to meditate through the chakras, which is to clear your energy centers based around different themes. And these themes all have different locations in your body. So as you're, moving through, you can clear and balance different energy centers. And that was life-changing for me. Like, for whatever reason, I needed this. And so we've, been friends ever since, and stayed on and on in touch throughout the years. And that kind of sparked my journey into the metaphysical. It sparked my journey into healing work. And through a bunch of modalities, I found a number of teachers and mentors who, taught me one thing or another about myself. That it's more like, it's not like they taught me, it's more like I suddenly remembered. I had struggled a lot with, just feeling like I was this person who was just way too emotional, and I think you get from coming from a rational world. It's like, oh, we should be smart, we should have a plan, we should do all these things. But really, when you're an artist, you have to listen to how you feel, because not only are you sensitive to what's going on around you and to the people in your life or to the things that you're going through, but also you're a channel for that information. A lot of artists that, they'll do this really cathartic music that is like almost like you're taking these deepest things buried in your soul and you're putting it on a piece of music. That takes like courage, and it takes sensitivity, and you can't just not feel it. You have to let yourself go through and do the inner work.
I noticed your email too, which might be tied into philosophy, because I saw a Zen. There was which I'm a big fan of Zen Buddhism, and there was a Zen philosophical phrase. I didn't write it down, but I wanted to bring up your email because you have kind of forced brevity on yourself. Can you walk us through?
Oh my gosh. Well, so this would be the neurodivergent part of myself. I pick up these little like heuristics that I find make life easier, because I tend to get very caught up in details and minutia. I think as a person who's like high on the Myers-Briggs N, like it's in my first slot, and I'm very much an idea person and associative thinking and stuff like that. I really can also get caught up in the details. So I'll sit and rewrite an email like 3-4 times. It might take me like an hour to write a 10-minute email. So I found this thing from this blogger named Leo Babauta from Zen Habits, and he signs off on all his emails. I limit myself to only 5 sentences to force me to use less time responding to email. And I was like, that's brilliant. So I think I don't have that on my like computer's email, but I think when I send things from my phone, it doesn't just say send from my phone, it says that. And
okay.
So yeah, what I've realized is that a lot of the communication is not just the words, but it's the format. And what is the role of the person speaking the words? So that, if you kind of get the corner on that, you realize, I mean, this is actually relevant to people starting a YouTube channel or artists who are listening to music. If you're releasing a classical music track to a bunch of people who listen to rave music, if they didn't click it, that doesn't mean your video wasn't good. It just means that they were looking for something else. And so most people skim to look for the information that's relevant for them. And so that's why, context is everything. I mean, music does that all the time. It's like, take a genre that somebody knows and is familiar with and likes and wants to listen to, and then like break the expectation just enough to really get their attention. You got to be the purple cow. It's was that Seth Godin, right?
Godin, yeah.
Yeah, and there's very much in the music industry, if you study people like Shep Gordon, I mean, that's what they're masters at, is like, how do you get people's attention in a media saturated environment? If there are thousands of records coming out this year, how do I get you to listen to my record?
What do you think that's why a lot of artists, like, let's just say one band that maybe everybody knows, Led Zeppelin. A lot of bands from that era were just doing old blues tunes. If you go back, they were mostly singing Robert Johnson songs, to be honest. I mean, he was kind of the base of the tree, and everything grew out of that. Even not the Who, but the Rolling Stones were doing Robert Johnson songs. So what we're seeing is, you don't want your first album to be that crazy experimental thing. You need to kind of get them in with something that's sort of familiar, and then, like you said, show them that surprise. I don't think it's
well, you do
to come out of the gate,
but you don't, because the other mistake that I've seen artists make is to try and follow the market.
That's right. Yeah.
And this actually applies to entrepreneurs as well. If you really, really know socks, and someone tells you should go into a different kind of business, but you really know socks, there's something that you might bring to the sock market that's completely off the wall, and no one's ever seen before, and no one's going to buy it until they do. This iPhone didn't exist. Like, go back and read some of the things that people said about the iPhone when Steve Jobs first said, I'm going to make a phone without a keyboard on it. People thought it was batshit crazy, right? So I think the thing with music is that ultimately, you just have to be honest with yourself about the audience perception. And sort of the hardest part ever for artists to do is to sort of, for a minute, step outside yourself and pretend you're a listener. This is why I worked with a producer who found Macy Gray, and that was one of the things that he said. It's like, put your music on the party and see what happens. Like, don't tell anyone it's you. Just because, and then don't ask your friends. Like, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's great. Like, ask people who aren't your friends or who are going to give you honest opinion. And just because they don't like it doesn't mean it's bad either, because you might not be asking people who like that kind of music. I mean, I could play you some Radiohead tracks that Robert, you'd probably be like, huh? Like, what is this? Right. But if the kind of musician who likes or the kind of music fan who likes Radiohead, there's a lot of things I could play you that would be right up your alley. So it's like, you need to find your group. With me as a producer, what I'm really good at is making sure that people, like, if they come to me with an idea and I think, okay, this is a good idea, and what does this idea need? What does this song need to be really good, or to be what it's trying to be? My job as the producer is to take this little idea. Maybe the guitar demo is slaying, maybe listen to it, or maybe it's just a really cool lyric and we need to like put more arrangement around it or rewrite some stuff, or record it a certain way. And it's to like take this artist and make that thing that they're making as best as it can be, and to know what are the technical things from an artistic standpoint that make this great. And it's my job to hear that when it's just a rough.
What is the way that you're seeing people monetize their art? Because as you mentioned with Napster, I mean, it completely destroyed the music industry. COVID did a number on the music industry, and now it's going through this, and now it's even going through something different. How are these artists, which, great music is still coming out. There are still some emerging artists that I'm big fans of. I don't have my ear to the ground like I used to.
How are artists making money right now selling t-shirts? Like, they're not making money with music. I had an artist who did a really standout record. It got really good press, and he's in a micro niche, which is awesome, progressive rock. And he did a very smart thing, which was, for the first 6 months his album came out, he, first of all, to release a proper record, you actually need to be like promoting it 6 months before it comes out. You're not just actually going, oh, we just finished mastering and I want everyone to hear it and click send. That's actually death to your project. Like, no one, once it's out, the cat's out of the bag, no one cares. You have to build up all kinds of anticipation. So where artists are doing all right is with pre-orders. So what he did was a really, really good, he did a small crowdfunding campaign. He'd done a big one before, and that was more work than it was worth. At this point, crowdfunding has peaked, but pre-order still works. So you can have people order the record that are on your mailing list who are interested before the record comes out. And then they're actually pretty bought into your product to tell the world about it at that point. So if you can really mobilize your fan base, what he did was he put on 3 months before his Spotify release, he put it on Bandcamp. So Bandcamp is a platform that lets people buy digital downloads and physical product, and it's really easy to use. So basically, he had that 3-month window where anyone who was going to buy the record bought it. And so he made some decent money through that. He didn't make his production budget back. And then by the time our Spotify royalties rolled in, I mean, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, I mean, it was, I think it was like, I think I got a $12 check at one point for that. I mean, it's just really, really hard. And, a lot of people in the industry will tell you, oh, it's all about film and TV licensing sync. Well, now everyone's trying to do that. So it's like, good luck trying to get a good deal doing that. Good luck trying to get a relationship with sync with a music supervisor. I mean, they can be decent checks, but it's also super competitive. And now there's all these music libraries out there. So it is really an awful time to make money as a musician, which is why I think it's more important than ever for musicians to have entrepreneurial skills, because there are also more tools now than ever to start your own shop where you can actually make cool t-shirts that say, what goes up must come down, and that's just a cool shirt someone would buy even if they don't listen to your band, right? Maybe that's just something that you memify and you put on the internet, and then that actually becomes a revenue stream. I'm not saying that that's what I'm advocating for, though, that you should be spending all this time outside of your music, because to the contrary, what I'm finding is most musicians are struggling because they feel like they have to be a full-time social media manager for themselves, and just to get people to listen or like their music. And all those likes do is turn into maybe a like or a play on Spotify and a micro penny. And so really, I think that's the irony, is that if you're not having someone do that for you, you're actually taking a lot of time away from your own art. Some of the best artists that I saw when I did the music showcase, who were great at fan engagement and who do really well on, like, let's say they have a Patreon, so the live streaming video platforms, and done really, really well with that. But what they used to do before, like after every show, was they would stand out in front of the table and greet every fan, and they would sign every CD, and they'd kiss every baby, and they were just genuinely making connections with everyone they met. And in the indie world, that does go a long way. I don't think that's scalable in a major label kind of sense, but I think in a way that's what Taylor Swift's brand is. I think people feel like she would sign your CD, and like she would give you a hug, and she would tell you that, she really cares about your grandma's eye cataracts surgery or whatever. I think that's wonderful. I would do like anything that you can, work with, other bands in more of a festival like environment, because those are the things where you're going to really start. And that's where it does help to have physical product to sell. I mean, that's why people who support music, they're buying CDs, even if they don't need a CD. They just want to have the book to look through. So print CDs, if you could do a short run. I don't love CDRs, but you can get some really beautiful ones. LPs, like if the economics work out to do LPs, people spend $45 on one. And that's actually, it's ironic. Like most of the musicians that I know are making their money through vinyl and things like that. So, it can be done.
The AI revolution was talked about. I was one of the first people to say, lower your expectations, because AI, something that puts 6 fingers on a hand, I don't think we're in big trouble. Now there are industries that are going to be in trouble. I'm in one of them. I'm in insurance, and people that are in banking and other endeavors. Yeah, there's going to be jobs lost to AI, but in intense creative endeavors, which almost gets us back to our original part of the conversation. Somebody who's lived in their car, who's had a broken heart, has the capacity to pick up a guitar and lay down some lyrics that no computer, because that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Only a human can have wisdom. A computer has knowledge, But just if you remember that movie in the 80s, Crossroads, where he said he kept telling the young blues player, he says, "You've got no mileage." And he's, "What are you talking about, old man?" And he said, "You got to get out on the road." And he got out on the road. He had a gun put in his face. He lost his girlfriend. And then suddenly he wrote this really great blues song. AI will never. So that comes from human experience, and AI will never. So again, I don't feel the threat from it's going to, AI is definitely going to change some things, but I'm actually hopeful because AI can't, that live music that I'm sure you and I love, being in the room, especially at a small venue, and a computer can't replicate that in our houses. I mean, not.
I feel like that's the antidote to the tech age as well. I think that if you're an entrepreneur and you can think of real world, person to person, face to face events that make sense to put people together, like I was talking about with records, it's like actually a really personal experience to just put on your headphones and listen to a record, first of all. Second of all, though, like with music, though, if you can get people together in a sense that feels connecting, I think there's something that you can't do in, the digital world. You can, in the sense, like, I really do feel like you and I are having a genuine connection right now. So it's this kind of like, it's this paradox where it's like technology actually does bring us closer in a lot of ways. And when you're with a loved one, there's nothing like being in their physical presence. And so I think that's, with music, though, there is some pretty big disruption coming with AI. I mean, the AI vocalists, in terms of like EDM stuff, there's some really good ones. And, I think there always are going to be certain kinds of music that are a bit more, like, not in a bad way, but more formulaic, where you can sort of get away with insert meaningful lyrics here and insert catchy hook here. And, so it's not to say that it's not going to change things. I think what's changed things, honestly, is the distribution platforms. My dad saw this coming years ago. He said, what's going to happen with Netflix once they go streaming is that basically they're going to just be able to gobble up all these different films that indie filmmakers are. There's a wait for the cream to rise to the top. So as a filmmaker, you raise your own $100,000, you shoot your own crew, you make your own craft service. And if your film happens to be one of 20,000 films that are great, you're the one, they'll just pick that one and they'll take most of the money. And it's kind of the same with, content. It's like, we're all content makers now. So I think it comes down to, let me finish my thought. Like with YouTube, right? YouTube doesn't pay you to make this video. They don't be like, here, Robert, let's give you, a $50,000 check to make a season of. It's free content for them, and the algorithm is basically the arbiter of like what I see. So I might not find your podcast if it wasn't connected to something else that's connected to something else. So it's a really weird paradox. But, basically what's happening is that it's kind of a remonopolization of things. I mean, the old school record industry was bad. I mean, you could read about it in, forget the name of the book, but the quote is something like, the music industry is a long, dark trench littered with bodies, and, on and on and on. And then it's like, and there's a dark side. The algorithms, like in some ways, it brings the opportunity to connect with fans all around the world that you wouldn't find otherwise. I think progressive rock is the perfect example, because there's been this resurgence of prog, and it was very big in the 70s. Genesis, yes. Rush, Kansas.
They're all millions. That's
right,
it, man.
So basically, in the last 12 years, 15 years, there's been this resurgence, but it's been because of online. So it's all these fans that are peppered throughout. I'm working with a client in Scotland right now who knows me through this other project, and wanted to make a record with me and like work with all his idols in this thing. And there's apparently enough fans peppered throughout the world. Like you can get like at a showcase room in LA of maybe 60 people together to see like a super group now of prog, or you can fly people from all over the world, and they actually do a cruise. They rent a cruise ship and 10,000 people cruise to the edge and do a prog cruise. Like that's the power of the internet. So never before can your business reach people in Denmark and people in Africa and people in Australia and people. So, I mean, that is like, it's an opportunity. and it's an issue at the same time. And, if there's anything that I would, leave for the audience, it's that don't do it alone. Form a collaboration, get in a creative mastermind, hire a friend to help you with that social media thing, for a little, or the photo shoot or whatever. The more we can get together and collaborate and not be in a vacuum, the better our mental health will be, the more creative we'll be. And every time I write a song with someone, they share it with the 10 people that they're sharing it with. It's almost like gets its own legs and goes off and into the world. Because if I'm just doing it, it's, I'm here in the studio working on some other song, right? So it's just, I think that's one of the things that we forget.
You can start those relationships virtual, and of course, ultimately end up in the same room face to face, which is even better. Before we go, let's talk about your website, because you have a creative catalyst session. Can you tell us what that?
Excellent. So when I was in about 2015, I was looking at how I could serve artists better, because a lot of them, I realized, after working on a number of records where I was the producer on the whole record, realizing that what was not very much money for me was a lot of money for musicians. To take $10,000 or $15,000 to make a proper record, and that's a cheap one. Just really is economically challenging. And so, but the flip side is people can make their own records in their house and do some really great things. The thing is not everybody has the experience that they'd like to measure up to what the standard of what they hear their favorite records sounding like. So my goal was to find a way to, in addition to the music producing and record production that I do, to make myself available to artists who are working in their home studios, to amplify their results, what they're doing. So the Creative Catalyst session can be an hour over Zoom if it's just you need advice about your project, or you need me to listen to mixes or whatever, or we can actually get into a session wire session where we can actually hook into your studio DAW and listen to what you're listening to, and we can actually work on your track together. If you want me to remote record your screen so that someone can, you can sing and I can vocal produce you, we can do that as well. I've actually been demoing out this idea of doing what we call producer for a day, which is where, you're working on your own record and I come over to your space. If you live here, we do it virtually if you don't. And, for 3 to 6 hours, I'll come in and, actually produce a session with you. And people use that for hey, I need to punch in vocals and I don't trust myself to record myself, or hey, I'm not sure if these drums sound quite right. Can you tell me if they can be mixed or if we need to re-record them? On and on and on. I just find it's so much better than staying stuck to reach out to someone who you trust to kind of help you fast track your results. And that's if there's one common ground between my podcast and my company and my production company, it's that I can't help it bringing you from here to here. I just want the song to be great. I just want what you're doing to be great. And, there's surprisingly sometimes easier than you think, and you don't need fancy, expensive gear to do it. You could make $100 microphones sound incredible with just the right, turn of the knob. So
how can people find you? Do you want people going to your LinkedIn? Do you want people going to your website? What's the best place to find you?
So if you're interested in the Creative Catalyst session or the producer for a day, you can find me at icreatesound.com, and you can connect with me there. I have a contact form because people were sending me emails saying, yo, could I record? And I'm like, record what? What kind of music do you have? What do you sing or play? What's your website? But there's that. And then I would really love people to go check out the Language of Creativity podcast. So you can get that at thelanguageofcreativity.com, or you can just search Apple, Spotify, on and on and on for the Language of Creativity podcast with Steven Leavitt. And you'll find the show. And that's where I live. I'm also on Instagram at icreatesound and at Language of Creativity. So I do a little bit of, inspirational post stuff there. And if you like photos of studio recordings, the I Create Sound one's a pretty fun place to be. Thanks. And thanks to your audience. I really hope that, thank you for the invite on the show. I really hope, Robert, that your show grows, and I wish you the best of success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines. To support the channel, please click like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode. The book Scintilla, The ultimate guide to generating business ideas, products, and services is now available on Amazon. It's available as an ebook, softcover, and hardcover. Please find the link to the Amazon page in the description, as well as other links relevant to this episode.